I'll take good. Place your right hand over your heart and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
Pledge allegiance.
Republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I have a few quick little. Actually, we'll do roll call really quick, and then I have a few announcements.
For Camarillo Airport Authority, Supervisor Long. Supervisor Long? Can she hear? She's on mute. Supervisor Long, you're on mute, but I'll mark you present because I see you on the screen. Supervisor Zaragoza? Supervisor Zaragoza?
Is anyone doing roll? Not yet.
All right, go again, sorry.
Supervisor Zaragoza?
Here.
Councilmember Molshay?
Present.
Councilmember Craven?
Here.
Bill Thomas?
Here.
Michael Hodson?
Present.
Camarillo has a quorum. For Oxnard Airport Authority, Supervisor Long?
Present.
Supervisor Zaragoza?
Here.
Mayor Flynn?
Present.
Councilmember Perello?
Here.
Walter Calhoun? Eugene Fussell?
Here.
Oxnard has a quorum.
All right, a few quick announcements tonight. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 and the order of the Ventura County Public Health Officer, which is also known as a Stay Well at Home order, which is the reason why, one, we must have the meeting the way we are, and two, the reason we can have the meeting the way we are having it tonight. For all of us here, and I should note that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube for the entire world to tune in and watch if they so desire. A few tips for all of us here in conducting the meeting. I know this is a little unique, but if you can please mute your audio when you are not speaking. Please unmute your audio when you are speaking or you intend to speak. I will do my best to keep the meeting organized and running. And when it is time to take a vote, we're going to call a roll call vote for each item, so everyone will have be asked to vote yes or no, or an abstention. All right, with that, we will move to item number 3, approval of the meeting minutes for March 12th. It's been a while. Do I have a motion to approve?
So Camarillo, Bill Thomas, move to approve.
Second.
I have a second from Mrs. Craven. And can we please take a vote?
Supervisor Long,
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Molshay,
Yes.
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Bill Thomas.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Approve the minutes for the city of Oxnard, for the Oxnard Airport Authority. Beg your pardon. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Long.
Yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Mayor Flynn,
Aye.
Councilmember Perallo,
Yes.
Eugene Fussell. Dr. Fussell? Yes, okay. That motion carries.
He said yes, he's just muted.
That motion carries.
Thank you very much. We are on to number 4, the public comment period. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, this public comment is from Mark Sullivan. This is submitted as a private Ventura County resident and concerned airport user and tenant. At the March 12th, 2020 Airport Authority meeting, the developer of Cloud9 was given nearly an hour of time to rebut the objections raised in the 3-minute slots afforded to persons like myself, who were objecting that environmental impacts could not be assessed without a lease provision, expressly precluding use of the hangars for Boeing 737s and similar large jets. In his extended rebuttal time, the developer's representative declined stating who the users will be if the project proceeds. He emphasized that even if Boeing 737s came to Camarillo, they could leave lightly loaded and thereby comply with the 1976 Joint Powers Agreement. This seemed odd, as no executive jet owner would use a BBJ for short hops. In April, Amazon announced a proposed major distribution center to be built in Camarillo. This was preceded by Amazon announcing a major distribution hub in San Bernardino to be supplied by its growing in-house prime air fleet of Boeing 737 cargo planes. Is Amazon the real end user of Cloud9? It would fit the developer's otherwise improbable scenario. The large jets would arrive full, but would leave light for the short hop to the air hub that Amazon is building at San Bernardino. If Cloud9 is the first step in establishing the airport as a jet cargo base for Amazon, the project cries out for an environmental impact report on the significant noise, emissions, and safety issues that frequent large aircraft freight operations would create at the airport. Mark Sullivan.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comments at this time?
No further comments.
All right. Moving on to number 5, we have no unfinished business. And so that will get us to new business for both the Camarillo and the Oxnard Airport Authority. Item A, review of the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget.
Hey, good evening. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully we'll be able to get back in more person here soon, but I'm glad everybody could join us in the way we are tonight, and thank you for those that are tuning in. This year's budget is a little unique in the fact that because of the coronavirus pandemic, it's required us all to take a little bit of a different position than maybe what we were gearing up for the next fiscal year. We were tracking very well with our budget for this fiscal year and still are for this fiscal year ending, and we've been on a good trend now for a number of years. However, with the virus and the unknown impacts of the virus that we are still going to be monitoring for the next several months, if not longer, the Department of Airports followed suit with pretty much, I think, the rest of the county in the same manner, in that we developed a baseline or basically a carryover budget from last year. So our revenues in this budget are reflective of the same revenues that we brought to you last year. Our expenses total to the same expenses, or within a couple of dollars of the same expenses that we came to last year as well. and we went back and looked at basically everything we could that we could cut, made all the cuts that we could make. In addition to that, we froze on doing new things that we were going to plan to do this next fiscal year, and started just reevaluating our entire budget. We had already developed another budget prior to the pandemic hitting us here, and obviously backed up and started reevaluating all of that from ground zero, if you will, once things started escalating in Ventura County back in March. That included our capital projects, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on as part of the 3 items that we have tonight. They're all budget related. I'm sorry, we're getting a little feedback. The 3 items that we have tonight are all budget, 3 of the 4 items we have tonight are all budget related. But tonight, starting on the first item here is the proposed budget. We also have Jamal, who is our finance manager for the Department of Airports, is on a link with us here tonight, so we can answer any questions you may have in any kind of detail, I think, and if not, we can follow up with you at a later point in time. The budget for this year also missed a couple other steps that we would have normally done. For example, in the past, there's been a budget workshop that just wasn't able to happen because of COVID-19 this year. And then also, we typically have other meetings internally and with the county that we weren't able to conduct this year because of the pandemic. So again, this is pretty much a carryover budget from the year before. Our plan is to evaluate what our impacts are, continue evaluating what our impacts are, and then take another look at our budget following first quarter fiscal year 21, hopefully, getting back to some normalcy by then, and taking another evaluation of where our budget stands then, and of course we'll report that back to these bodies as well. But so for tonight, I'm happy to stop here and have Jamal tuned in, and we can answer any questions that there may be regarding the numbers, again, that are very similar to what you saw a year ago for those of you that were sitting in these positions a year ago.
Thank you, Director Turner. Do we have any questions? That concludes the presentation. Is that correct?
Actually, no. I was sort of pausing there for a moment. If I can advance to the next slide. I'll go over. I didn't know if there was any initial questions, and then well, we'll just jump right in. We'll go over a couple more slides and touch on the highlights. So, John, if you'll move forward to the next slide. There we go. So just to give you a little bit of a highlight of this budget, again, in tune with last year, but we do have some different things to talk about in conjunction with that. Our current year, fiscal year accomplishments, again, the current year ends in June 30th. We've initiated the master plan study for Camarillo Airport. That includes a system planning element for the Oxnard Airport, so we're really excited about that. It's going to allow us to take a holistic look at both of our airports and the next 10 years or 15 years of our 2 airports working together as one. We were able to secure a $600,000 FAA grant for that. That was not something that was expected, so we were excited about that as well. So that's going to pay a good portion of this project, which is about a $740,000 project, and again, about $600,000 of it through an FAA grant that we've now gotten. We this year filled a couple of key administrative staff positions. Our operations supervisor at Oxnard Airport had been a vacant position for well over a year. Actually, it was vacant when I arrived as the director April of last year, so I'm not sure exactly how long it had been vacant, but I know it had been vacant for a while. We have filled that position, and we have a new deputy director of airports, Dave Nafee, who I'll introduce later on a little more formally. We've initiated phase 1 development of our northeast hangar complex at the Camarillo Airport. Most of you may recall that's been a project that's been in the works, I believe, since about 2017. Aaron can speak a little more to that, definitely long before my time. So our team and all those involved with that project are excited to see that project up and going, and it's being built pretty quick. So we're excited about that. Looks like it's definitely on time thus far for completion sometime later on this year. Taxiway hotel and connectors at the Camarillo airport was a project we had in the books to do this year. We have completed that project as well, and we've also completed some projects over at the Oxnard airport, one of which we opened up a new satellite director's office at the Oxnard airport. Did that about 7 or 8 months ago now, and that's been well received. Have a lot of drop-in guests at the Oxnard airport on the 2 days that I'm there working hours on Tuesdays and Fridays, and that seems to have been well received, so I'm excited about that and how that's worked. And John, if you'll go to the next slide. Also at the Oxnard airport, last year we had been noted by the FAA with some discrepancies that were issues there that they had pointed out during their Part 139 commercial inspection that they do annually with us. We have since completed all of those revisions and discrepancies that they wanted us to revise and repair and do, and we've gotten those all done. That also led us, or part of that led us to a PFAS investigation, and I apologize, I should have written out for the PFAS what that acronym is, but basically it's something that's been nationwide, sparked some interest, particularly with aircraft rescue and firefighting departments, particularly for the chemicals that were being used in the fire treatment. And our aircraft rescue and firefighting department at the Oxnard airport it uses those same chemicals as well. So that led to us doing an investigation on that, and there'll be more follow-up on that as that continues to be completed. We initiated the Oxnard runway and taxiways reconstruction final design. You actually see that before you tonight, so that'll still be in this fiscal year where we get that project moving again. That project is also a project for the Oxnard reconstruction of the runway, the taxiway, and the connectors. Again, we do have an item on that in the agenda, so we'll talk more specifically about that later. That project, though, has been on the books for quite some time and is in, definitely in need for our airport at Oxnard, and so we're excited about that. One of the things that sort of led us to holding off on that project last year, I'll talk a little bit more about later, was coordination with the FAA on building back the right runway. We've since gotten that cooperation that we needed and partnership, so we're excited about moving forward in that. Our Madeline has done a great job working hard and leasing additional properties, particularly on our Camarillo Business Park and even on our airside some, but altogether she's found new leases for about 36,000 square feet of office and land space, which equates to about $225,000 annually in that added space that she's leased out. Effective June the 1st, our leasing, we're leasing another additional 150,000 square feet of parking space for a company that's going to be working with Amazon delivery vans, and that is going to be about another $202,000 annually. And we'll rotate slides there. So talking about our budget, a little focus on this year due to, again to the COVID-19 strategy, sort of touched on as in the opening statements. Our fiscal year 2019-2020 budget year-end results are unknown at this time, although we are still anticipating, even with expected impacts, we're still anticipating finishing still in the positive, so we're excited about that. Our fiscal year 2021 budget, again, we took more of a zero-based approach, carryover approach, if you will, due to the pandemic, and our revenues and appropriations, as I mentioned earlier, are budgeted similar to the prior fiscal year. Our department excuse me, our department is right now preparing reduction scenarios. Actually, we've already been doing this for quite some time, since March, but at 10 and 15%. We've actually gone further than that. We've been, Jamal and I have been working and preparing reduction scenarios at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30%, just until we can, just to be ready in case we need to come back and talk about impacts that, you know, again, were unknown at this time, but trying to get prepared for whatever that conversation might need to look like. All of our leases and fees are uncertain at this time due to COVID-19, which is why you'll see when we do the rent and fee schedule, which again is an element of our budget every year, but a separate element, you'll see that we've kept that the same and carried that over as well, because we're just uncertain at this time of what our businesses on the airport and impacts will be. We've got 67 commercial businesses on our 2 airports. 67 or 69 commercial businesses on our 2 airports, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about the impacts to those businesses that are known, and then of course the unknown is hard to talk about at this point, and all of that leads into our fees as well. Cash reserves are sustainable for anticipated costs and projects. We're very blessed in that we had been putting back money for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, getting ready for the 2 runway projects that both airports, because both airports are in dire need of the runway projects, reconstruction projects. So in doing so, we knew there was going to be, in addition to any airport improvement program grant funding that we would be eligible to receive, we knew there would also be the need to have local matches, and on those kind of projects, you're talking millions of dollars of projects, so that drives up the local match. So we had been studiously putting back money for those projects, so our reserves are very sustainable right now, although they are planned for major improvement projects that are direly needed. So we are hoping that we don't have to get into those reserves to cover operations, but worst case scenario, I guess if we had to, we are in a position where we could if it comes to that. Our capital projects, we immediately started reevaluating all of our capital projects, small and large. We tabled several smaller capital projects that we were looking at, that we were going to fund ourselves out of operations revenues next year. We immediately tabled those, so you won't be hearing about those tonight. And we've done everything we can, we think, to make sure that we're only working towards projects at this point that are going to be partially or primarily funded by grant expenses, and just our local matches go to that, and also projects that are only essential projects in our minds at this time for the safety of our airports. And next slide, John. So again, staying on our budget focuses here, we initiated measures to ensure sustainable reserves. Back in March, right after the governor's order first went out, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but having been doing this since 1985, I've lived through some tough times at different airports. 9/11, of course, and then back in the southeast where I spent a lot of years, we had a lot of hurricanes, and all of those type of impacts when they would hit the economy for whatever the reason was that caused the economy to have a downturn. Airports always tend to suffer pretty hard on that. So I knew when this started escalating for our state and for our county that we needed to be as proactive as possible. So we immediately started taking some of the actions that I've already discussed and still discussing. So we immediately went to a temporary hiring freeze on the Department of Airports for the 4 open positions we have. We reduced non-essential costs at all levels. Again, we had a different kind of budget prepared to talk to you about. We immediately went to work and started scratching that budget up and came back with now what we have tonight. We deferred all non-essential projects, all non-essential work. We started reevaluating all projects, including even our airport improvement program projects that are even the ones that are funded by grants, just because we wanted to make sure that we weren't chasing projects that were non-essential for the moment and for the time. We plan to conduct another budget review, as I said, following the first quarter. and we're seeking additional project grant funding from the FAA in hopes of getting even some more partnership from them on the things we are doing. John, next slide. So this sort of gives you a summary of what you will see in your budget packet. Obviously, the budget packet is very lengthy and detailed. Again, it's very reflective of what you saw last year for those that were in positions on the authorities that were involved with this last year. So it shouldn't be a shock to those of you. So the appropriations, as you see, for fiscal year 1920 were $7,802,151. This year, we got as close as we could on that, into $7,803,781. So I mean, I think we're just a few $100s off there. Revenues are exactly right now planned dollar for dollar. And you'll see we're still, if things materialize and if our revenues come in as we would hope that they come in, we're still finishing in the positive both years. Again, that last line assumes no impact to the budget from COVID-19, which we already know there's going to be impact. We just don't know what the extent of it is yet. But as you can see, we've got some room there to absorb some impact. So we're gonna see how that looks and go from there. Next slide, John. Just to give you a little bit of idea of how our budget is broken up, you can see from this pie chart here, we have a very diverse budget, which is a good thing. Some airports that I've seen over the course of my career are not so diverse, and so it's a very positive thing that we do have that diversity here. A lot of times airports lean real heavily in one direction or another, but here we do have a good mix, and I'm excited for that. You'll see in our non-aviation category, primarily our business park is what makes up the bulk of that. We have a nice share there that complements our aviation side of the house. Our GA fees at the top, our hangar ties, hangar and tie-down fees, and then miscellaneous aviation fees and so forth, and then our aviation service providers. It really forms out a good diverse pie there, so I'm excited to be able to talk about that. This is my first budget discussion with you. I came in last year while we were wrapping up the budget, and Jorge was doing a good job of explaining our budget to everyone, and so this is my first time to really be in depth with you talking about how our budget looks, and I can tell you that's a healthy breakdown, so I'm excited to be a part of that. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
The very top one, GA. What is GA?
General aviation. I'm sorry. General aviation. And then this is the appropriation side of the chart. You know, it's no surprise that pretty much any organization that's a service-oriented organization, there's always a large piece of the pie that goes to salaries and benefits for the personnel because, again, we're performing a service, and that's where a lot of that comes from. The services implies makes up another quadrant of that, and then other charges. So that's a good diverse there too, and actually that's a healthy breakout as well. Oftentimes some airport budgets are not that diverse on the appropriations either. So I'm excited about how that looks on both sides of the pie chart. And I believe, John, is there any more? Or was that the last slide on the budget? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the capital budget. So we'll go back, John, and we'll wait till we get to the capital. Well, let's see. Actually, I think that was set for this discussion too. Go ahead and go to the capital. And if it is a repetitive thing, we'll cover it twice. But this is the Camarillo capital budget summary, if you will. So we've got, as you can see here, this was a whole lot larger chart of projects before COVID-19. We've dwindled it down to what we think are the essential projects only at this point in time. So you can see for Camarillo for this year, we don't really have much at all in store because we're gearing up for the Camarillo runway project in 2024, and we're going to have some work starting actually possibly even the latter part of this fiscal year, this next fiscal year, in the design and environmental work for that we'll come back to you at a later point in time, if indeed we can move forward in those realms at those point in times. We'll come back and talk about that separately. They're not listed here tonight because we're trying to be as conservative as we can on the unknowns of the impacts that we might be facing. I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay. Next slide, John. And the Oxnard capital budget is the largest one. This slide is representing the runway reconstruction project. So we're about to, as you'll see, as we'll discuss here later on, talk about the item number 4 on the agenda tonight is the moving forward with the final design for the Oxnard runway project, and I'll save that conversation for that agenda item. But the bulk of what you see here for the Oxnard runway project is related to that project. Right now, we're expected to have grant funding come into play to help us get the construction on that project started next June. And since it will be at the latter part of the fiscal year, it still is in the fiscal year, so we need to show it. So it's showing actually the construction, but the construction won't start until June, 1st of June of next year. So, but it has to be reflected here, and we have the ability to reflect it here and represent that. So, John, is there another slide, or was that it? I think there's one on the queue. Yep, Camarillo Road and lighting. So the airport has the Camarillo Road and lighting. It's made up of the airport and a few other entities that join forces with us. The share for the Department of Airports is the larger share, and rightfully so. This covers the roads, the lighting, several things that Aaron can talk much better about if you have questions than I. But it's something that we do a budget allocation for every year because most of the roads and lighting and so forth are in our business park. That justifies our share of this. So, and that's street maintenance, lighting, storm drains, et cetera. And we do not have any capital projects planned for 2021, again, because we understand the impacts of COVID-19 and that's hitting at our businesses. That would play into this. It hits our revenues and our expenses as well. So we kept this at a status quo for the next year for the same reasons. Next slide. I'm sorry, go back. That was it. So that would be the presentation we have for tonight's budget. Again, we have Jamal tuned in with the link as well. Jamal is the expert that can take us down any other roads you might want to go on the details. I'll try. If he or I can't get it, we'll come back to you. And the only thing I would finally say on this is because we have to have a budget approved by the Board of Supervisors before the new fiscal year starts. Obviously, the fiscal year ends June 30th. The new fiscal year starts July 1st. We just followed suit, again, with what we think the rest of the county's doing for the most part, and had pretty much a carryover budget. So our budget is included with the county's overall budgets hearing, which is set for June 22nd and 23rd, I believe. So ours is part of that. So our budget will be moving forward in conjunction with the county's budgets in that hearing and in those hearings on this 22nd and 23rd. And we're happy to take any questions.
Do authority members have any questions?
One question for me. Hello?
Yep, go for it.
And maybe state your name, I guess, for the audience. So.
Yeah, this is Mike Hodson.
Okay. Hey, Mike.
Take it away, Mike.
Yeah, I'm trying to ask the question: is the FAA have any indications that any of the grant funding will be affected by the COVID situation? Is that all pretty stable? Do we have any information on that?
Yeah, Mike, that's a good question. We've not heard any kind of concern that Airport Improvement Program grant funding is affected. It's not funding that comes from the FAA's general, or from the federal general coffers. Airport Improvement Program funding is a user fee-based funding that airports, we basically put money into it from our user fees, and it feeds that pot of money. So that is already, that's an independently fed pot of money that we then have the ability to draw back from on projects that we can justify. So it's not a fund that would come from, you know, the federal general fund or anything of that nature. So it usually carries a little bit of different kind of protections, I guess. And we've not heard any kind of concern at all that pot of money is affected or will be curtailed in any other way. It is a good question.
Well, I just didn't know with the user fees being obviously pretty dramatically impacted with the lack of airline traffic and general aviation down in general. I just didn't know how that would affect our grant funding.
Yeah, no, it very well could. I think it's probably got money in the fund that's, you know, already there that would probably be used as well. And also, I think I'm not heard of anything that would be a negative or a concern on that. The good thing about it is the projects we're working on, we receive the funds as we do the work and we draw it out. So if we saw that there was any kind of issue, for example, on, let's just use the largest project we have in front of us, and that's the runway project for Oxnard, if we got into that work and then all of a sudden we were informed by the FAA that the AIP program would not be able to support its expectations of projects this year, we could just stop work, and that would be, you know, we could stop work, and that would of course stop the billing.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the information.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Zaragoza, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, first I want to thank Kip, you know, and the staff for an excellent budget, you know, and I'm looking at the proposed budget, but I think that on page 2 of the proposed budget, bullet point number 5 says it very well, you know, that because of the pandemic impacts that are unknown, that we're going to require to review this budget again in the first quarter, and I'm sure that Kip is following the same scenario that we're following with the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. We're going to look at our budget again in September, and this will, like as mentioned here in the bullet point, this is going to provide additional opportunity to better understand the economic impacts on the revenues. And one of the things that he has here, too, is that long-term stability is extremely important. And, of course, and he's got a scenario here that regarding the severe impacts, or if any at all, then he's got a proposal that he can come out with a reduction scenario of 5, 10, and 15%, which, you know, I think that he's looking for the future. And I think it's a good budget, and I'm sure that other people have some comments by... I'd like to propose that we approve the budget and to send it to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Do we have any other questions at this time before we get into, well, we'll get into public comments after questions.
So I just have, Mr. Chair, I just have one question. This is Tim Flynn.
Go for it, Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, I just curious to know, and again, I'm sorry that, you know, sometimes I have more time to go through the budget, you know, more thoroughly to look at this item. One of the interests of especially those of us that are on the Oxnard part of this equation are interested in how it would be possible, and again, this has to do with money, that we might be able to attract a commuter airline to come back to the city of Oxnard for commuter aircraft travel. And I know there's a lot of concern in Camarillo from what we heard about, about changes in plans in Camarillo. So my question is, how much, in fact, can we say that will come out of this budget that will be earmarked for those types of activities to attract possibly airlines to coming back to the city of Oxnard, to the airport in Oxnard?
That's a good question, and one I'm excited to talk about. The element of money, or the portion of money that is coming out of this budget, it could arguably be a couple of different things. One, for us right now, it's more about, forgive my analogies here, but it's more about putting together the toolbox that we need before we go do the work. So right now, I consider us in a toolbox building stage, in that the master and system plan that we're doing for the two airports is going to be a wonderful platform that is going to have a number of public workshops. It's going to have a lot of opportunities for public participation at all levels. Our leaders in our cities, our leaders in our county, our leaders across all 10 cities of the county. And it's going to be a platform, if you will, that allows us to gauge I guess the interest in trying to bring commercial service back to Ventura County. I can tell you that I've already done some preliminary studies since I got here. I went to work on that right away, and we have a wonderful story to tell to the airlines, and I have no doubt that if we come out of the master plan and the system plan with support for airline service, that we would be a good candidate for having some really good discussions with the airlines. Now, having said all of that, timing right now to talk to the airlines is ridiculously terrible because of this pandemic that we're all living with and going through right now. The airlines are suffering worse than probably most industries, or as bad as any industry you can think of. They really get hit hard in these kind of things. I'll talk more to that in my director's report, so I won't belabor on it now. But I can tell you that Ventura County, with a population of well over 800,000, and the assets that we have as a county, we're a wonderful player for airline discussions, but we've got to build that toolbox first. And that toolbox is getting community support for something of that nature and making sure we as a county want to pursue that, because if we pursue it and we're half-hearted with it, we could probably still have a quick win or two when things get back to some normalcy, but it would not be sustainable. So we want it to be sustainable when we do it, and we want it to be something that when we do it right, and we bring the right service to the right markets, and that kind of thing. And we're already working hard on that. We're already spending some money. To answer your question specifically, we spent some money in this fiscal budget on some preliminary studies for that. This master and system plan definitely includes that as a component of the plan. I would say one of the major components. It's not all that the plan's about. There's many other factors of the system and master plan that we're embarking on that need to be addressed and discussed and strategized as well. But definitely airline service is a component of that, and a big one. So depends on how you look at it when it comes back to money. That system plan we're doing is about $740,000. We've got money set aside for continuing studies on the side in preparation of building that toolbox I was talking about. And I think when we get everything lined up, there's no doubt in my mind that we'll find the money we need operationally to do the next steps there, and then it'll be, we'll have the right toolbox and we'll have the right approach. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Chair and Mr. Turner and my colleagues. I just want to stress that as we talk about the recovery and the continued recovery of the economy given the circumstances we've endured over the last several months. I just see, and I'm not the only one. I mean, I think the business community in particular and consumers would like to see this come back. And I know it's very much a market-driven issue, so that's clear. However, I think in the past we apparently came very, very close to attracting an airline back, and it had to do with the width of the runway wasn't quite where it needed to be for the type of aircraft that would have come into Oxnard. So I just want to, stress that I think in the context of this economic recovery, we have to be thinking of absolutely everything we can do to bolster the economy. And I mean, that sounds like, it's common sense, right, that we all want to do that. But I just really want to stress, as at least one person on this commission, that we are particularly focused this next fiscal year on reattracting an airline to the city of, to not just the city of Oxnard, to the Ventura County airports, the airport in Oxnard, and I'm looking forward to that, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Thank you for the support. I had some discussions with airlines over this past year, and they were very positive. Two particular airlines, I've been doing this for a while. I had two different airlines that I was talking to with colleagues that I know in those airlines, and they were asking when we were going to be ready to have discussions. Now, again, this was all pre coronavirus. Their positions are probably a little different right now. And I told them the same thing I'm speaking to this audience on now, that, we're excited, we're looking forward to those discussions. We know we're a viable player, but we want to put our package together and our toolbox together and make sure we're doing it right when we have those discussions. So I think when the time comes, it'll be very appropriate and it'll be very well strategized, and we'll have the right approach, and it'll be a successful approach when it's the right time.
Do I have any other,
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions prior to moving to public comment? Mr. Pro?
Yeah, just basically three comments. My first initial one was the $600,000 grant, and Mr. Hodson, I want to thank him for asking the question. I want to thank the general manager for answering it. The second, Mr. Zaragoza touched on it. I personally want to thank the general manager for looking at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, whatever it takes. Often we don't get leadership that's looking outside the box until something bad happens. That's in my book, that's a very good mark. The second and third point is, I feel that you've addressed every question that's been answered extremely well. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's my comments.
If there are no additional questions, we'll move to public comments. And I know we do have at least one.
This public comment is from Scott Bear. Can staff provide some detail about what comprises the open quote other charges close quote that make up 26% of the combined appropriations?
I'll ask Jamal to try to jump on that one.
Just checking if there is a slide that this refers to. Can you put it up?
I don't know that we have a slide specifically for just that item, but Jamal, if you would weigh in, that'd be great.
Yes, Kip. Other charges is made up mostly, the biggest number in there is depreciation. And the provision for account losses is in there as well. But the biggest piece of that is depreciation.
Thank you.
There's no further public comment on this item.
All right, seeing no additional public comment, are there any further questions or comments from authority members prior to entertaining a motion?
Mr. Chair, Zaragoza?
Yes, Mr. Zaragoza.
To approve, the budget, to send it up to the Board of Supervisors. That's my motion.
All right, I have a motion. This is suggested action. Do I have a second?
Yeah, Bill Thomas, I second the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I should clarify this. Will this be for both Oxnard and Camarillo? Do we need to call separate votes?
It is it's a Camarillo item and an Oxnard item.
So we can do it jointly.
separate would be
Okay,
helpful.
separate would be
Thank
ideal.
you.
Okay, so this will just be for Camarillo. We do have a first and a second. Can we please call the roll?
Supervisor Long,
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Molshay,
Yes?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Bill Thomas.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Do we have a recommendation for the Oxnard Airport Authority?
So move. Zaragoza.
Second, Flynn?
Roll call, please.
Supervisor Long,
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Mayor Flynn,
Aye.
Councilmember Perallo.
Yes.
I see that Walter Calhoun has joined the meeting. Walter Calhoun? You are on mute, Mr. Calhoun.
Can you hear that?
Okay, thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We're on to item number B. It's rather lengthy. I'm not going to read it all, but
All right.
staff has a report. It's effectively approval of the Department of Airports fiscal 2020-21 rent fee schedule.
John, slide. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Chairmans. The rent and fee, I sort of touched on it a moment ago, and the same will apply for the ASIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, but just to stay continuous here. The rent and fee document is obviously part of our budget, but it's separate. It's a written fee schedule that we adopt every year. It requires a public hearing for approval and adoption by the Board of Supervisors. That public hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday, the 16th, at a time certain, I believe, of 10 or 10:30 in the morning. Because of the impacts, very much similar to the discussion that just was had on the budget itself, we just kept the rent and fee the same. So typically every year the rent and fee you would see it being changed to include some type of increase. If nothing else, a CPI increase or what's been the practice, I think, over the years here for a number of years is every 5 years it would have an adjustment. This was the adjustment year, so we were anticipating doing an adjustment on the 5-year adjustment this year. But we decided that was not the appropriate time with the pain that everyone is feeling from the coronavirus and the impacts that are from that. We didn't want to add to that pain, so we kept the rent and fee document the exact same document as the last year's rent and fee document that these bodies and then the Board of Supervisors ultimately approved and adopted. There was only one change that we did make, and it had nothing to do with fees. And it's important to note that the change that we made is only applicable if and when the Board of Supervisors takes up and or takes action on a hangar lease revision. But since we do this rent and fee document only once a year, and there's a pretty decent process that it has to go through, including the advisory commission, the advisory the authorities, and then ultimately a public hearing with the Board of Supervisors, we felt if we did the placeholder for the ability for the director to have the ability, again, once and if and when the Board of Supervisors hears and takes a motion on the hangar lease revision, which I'll talk more to in a moment. We're not even planning to, we purposely left that off of this month's agenda. We didn't want any kind of items that might be items of concern or controversy on this month's agenda. We kept this month's agenda as light as we could after having 2 months with no meetings, and then our first month back for this department, our first virtual meeting that we're, thank goodness it's all working out so far, I think, John. we're working so far, right? So we really didn't know what this meeting would be. The items that you're hearing tonight are pretty much time-sensitive items that we had to move forward on one way or the other. So we kept all the controversial items, or potentially items that might not necessarily controversial, but items that might draw public, desire for participation to a greater detail. We just kept those off tonight, particularly, again, the hangar lease. Matter of fact, we don't envision even trying to take the hangar lease to the Board of Supervisors any earlier than probably September at this point. We realized, and from the last meeting that we had in March, that we had a little more work to do. We went and did that work, and that's not an agenda item tonight, so I won't stay on that too long, but we will be coming back to both the commission and to the authorities on that item. But with that being said, there's two different pieces of work that had to be done or have to be done for that to ever find completion. One of those pieces of work included a provision put into the rent and fee schedule that, again, if and when only the Board of Supervisors does hear and take action on a new hangar lease, that would then, after that, I would, as the director, be able to execute that lease, basically, is what this provision is. We could have, and we talked about not putting that placeholder in the rent and fee at this point in time, and then we realized what process was going to be required just to come back and modify the rent and fees, so we didn't see any harm in putting that placeholder in the rent and fee schedule now, even though it really has no applicable ability until a new hangar lease is approved by the Board of Supervisors, which, again, that won't happen until it first comes back to these bodies, and we have the confidence from these bodies that it's ready to go forward to the Board of Supervisors. So that's the only change to the rent and fee, and that's the explanation why, and we're happy to talk about anything else related to the rent and fee, but otherwise the rent and fee is the same rent and fee you adopted last year.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Do authority members have any questions?
I need to make a clarification.
Your microphone's off. Sorry.
I have had ex parte communication with two members from the public, Mr. Scott Bauer and Mr. David Timms, on items, and I appreciate it, but I needed to make the public aware of that, and I do appreciate the explanation the general manager, again, has given. I'm grateful that you're above board that much, and I mean, that came out wrong. That open and transparent is oftenly an abused term. I appreciate the way you're handling it very much.
Thank you, sir.
That's my comment.
On the heels of Mr. Perot's comment, I will announce that I also had communications with Scott Breyer and in regards to some questions on this item. Aside from that, do we have additional questions from authority members on this item prior to moving to public comment? All right, I will take the silence as no, but we can ask questions following public comment if need be, if anyone has one come up. But do we have any public comments?
One public comment from Dave Timms, private hangar owner and aircraft owner based at Camarillo Airport. The FAA specifies certain aircraft maintenance requirements, one being an aircraft static system altimeter and transponder check every 2 years for every airworthy aircraft. The service is not readily available at our 2 county airports, which is typically provided by a mobile mechanic at the aircraft owner's hangar. I am not aware of a fixed base operator providing that service at our 2 airports. As listed in the proposed rent and fee schedule, a mobile mechanic has to pay $1,879 per year, and I'm guessing other airport insurance requirements cost for a permit to provided this mandatory aircraft maintenance service on our county airports. From the mechanic's viewpoint, it is not economically viable, and in my view, that is why the service is not available at our airports. I am asking this authority to recommend that the rent and fee schedule include a provision that the Department of Airports have an option to waive permit fees for certain critical and necessary aviation services at our airports. David Timms.
Thank you very much. Do we have additional public comment?
No further comment.
Do we have additional questions and or comments from authority members? Yeah, Bert.
General Manager, can you address the comments that were just read in by Mr. Timms? And again, I'm not an airplane guy, but it would seem that if somebody's going to, and my opinion, just asking, trying to set this question up, sure. If somebody's going to come onto your property to do business, they better have the licenses and they better have the insurance and all this stuff so that there's nothing going wrong. The other part of it is, are people that have an airplane able to fly or somewhere else close by, get the work done, and return? I have no idea if it's a 10, 15 minute or an 8-hour job. I have no idea. The cost of the license or the permit to do the business, I have no idea what these jobs cost. Can he make that up in one job, 2 jobs, or takes 2 dozen jobs? I have no idea. The second is, if there is only one person doing it and the fees are excessive and the person goes out of business, will that cripple the private pilots in these 2 county airports? There's a bunch of questions in there, but I don't know. But I respect the guy asking the question.
Absolutely, and as do I. And thank you, and thank Mr. Timms for the question and for pointing out something I wasn't aware of. The items of work that Mr. Timms is referring to are, as all items are, on particularly any aircraft, are critical items. They're items that probably are not everyday items. We do have different people that are performing mechanical services, or aircraft and power plant mechanics and technicians that are in avionics, and people that are doing work on our airports now. This is a particular item of work that requires a little bit different setup, if you will, but I'm glad he's pointed it out. The timing for us to hear about this, and quite frankly any other needs we have, is perfect. The carryover that we're doing in this year's rent and fee is we obviously don't have the ability to address it tonight and have this thing passed Tuesday, which we need to have it passed before we get into a new fiscal year. But we had already decided that this next year we're going to do an entire analysis of our rent and fee structure. It's a rent and fee structure that's been in place for a number of years. Our analysis may come back that it's the perfect structure, but it's also time to take a holistic look at it, try to fill in the blanks on anything that we have missing, such as the services that Mr. Timms talked about here. Try to make sure that our fees are competitive, our fees are fair, and that kind of thing. So we're embarking on that endeavor this year anyway. We were already planning to do that. We'll actually probably hire some outside help to assist us with that. There's companies that do that for airports, and we'll be seeking that help and doing that probably not very far from now, when we'll be engaging on that effort, because it'll take several months probably to get us the answers we're looking for, and we want to have them in place so that we can have that to talk about when it comes time for this next year. So we appreciate the feedback Mr. Timms has given, and we'll definitely incorporate that into that work that we're doing to try to make sure our rent and fee structure covers all the needs that it needs to cover.
I'm satisfied with your answer. Thank you very much. I will just share this with you. I serve in another agency where management, in hindsight, went back and looked at a fee structure, and they found that when they had raised the last fees, they didn't include everything they needed to. So it sounds like you're looking at everything. From
everything, yeah.
That's a compliment again to the management. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Zaragoza, I thank you again for the presentation, and I'd like to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation 1, 2, and 3.
All right, I have a motion to approve item 1, 2, 3. Do I have a second on the Camarillo side?
Second.
I'll give it to Mr. Thomas. I have one point of clarification, Mr. Turner, if I can. That you already mentioned it prior to our vote, but the hangar lease revision will come before this body for a vote prior to being brought to the Board of Supervisors.
Absolutely, yeah. In the March meeting, you had asked us, these bodies, the authorities particularly, had asked us to go back and Supervisor Long had summarized it very well towards the end of the meeting, the very long meeting that we had in March, but she had summarized it, and the bodies had unanimously agreed with that summary that we were to go back and look at 6 different sections, and we actually did that. And again, this is, I don't want to get us in trouble here talking about an item in detail that's not on the agenda, but long story short, we took that recommendation, we went back, and even though we felt we had the 6 sections already set up for success, we actually found ways to put more revision to 5 of those 6 sections, and we think that when we bring those back for discussion, that the parties that had the concerns are going to be pleased with that. But we don't need to get into too much of that because it's not an agenda item, but and I don't want us to break the rules there, but we definitely answer your question. It will be coming back.
All
yes.
right.
Mr. Chair, if you'll allow it, we just received an email public comment.
Sure.
It's from Scott Bearer. Is the 2% fee waiver for hangar transfer for current owners still in the revised rents and fees schedule? I thought I just heard that the only change pertained to the placeholder for the lease after the form is approved by the board. Please clarify. Thank you.
The rent and fee, all of the fees are still the same. So yes, the answer to that would be yes. The board would be able to give me the ability to waive that if that were to be an action that the board takes. So it would not require us to go back and do a public hearing, as to my understanding. So the rent and fee structure is still the same rent and fee structure, only with the language that allows the director to take action if and when, again, the Board of Supervisors takes action on a new hangar lease.
All right.
And I don't know that I was supposed to necessarily answer that, but so if I was out of turn,
Consider
I apologize.
it a question for me then.
Thank you. I apologize if I was out of turn.
All right. Aside from that, we already had a motion and a second for staff's recommended action of the 1, 2, and 3 recommendations outlined in the agenda. At this time, we will take a vote. For Camarillo. Yes, thank you.
For Camarillo, Supervisor Long?
Yes, and thank you for the kind words.
Supervisor Zaragoza?
Yes.
Councilmember Molshe?
Yes.
Councilmember Craven?
Yes.
Bill Thomas?
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
For the Oxnard Airport Authority, for item 6B, point 1, 2, and 3, do we have a recommendation from the committee, the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
For Oxnard, Supervisor Long?
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza?
Yes.
Mayor Flynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Perallo? Walter Calhoun?
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. I got a note from staff and that if everyone will bear with us, we need just a few minutes. We're going to take a little intermission, so we'll recess for a few minutes, so that way they can take care of some technical issues that arose just recently. It is 8:09 at this moment. Is it 3 minutes? Do you guys want 5 minutes?
3 to 5.
All right. How about we'll recess now until 8:15. And then we'll resume this meeting at 8:15. So if anyone needs to get a drink of water or something, then we can do so now.
All right.
Who's that? Who's that talking? Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
You're loud and clear.
Oh, how about on the first item? Did anybody hear my vote?
No, because it didn't. It didn't switch over to.
Well, I'll know who to zoom in on if I need information. Hey, Bill?
Yes.
Will you do me a favor?
I think they gave you credit for it.
Yep.
All right, everyone, we're going to call back this body, both the Camarillo and Oxnard Airport authorities. During the intermission, I was told that an additional public comment came in, and considering the rather trying times, and this is very unique for all of us, we will, at this time, I'll call for the additional public comment to be read into the record. And we did come back at 8:15, yes.
This is from Mark Sullivan regarding Amazon vans. Where are that many vans going to be parked? 202,000 per year, question mark. Mark Sullivan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And when we get to the director's report, I'll ask your question of our director. All right, with that, we will move on to subject C, approval of the 5-year capital improvement plan for both the Camarillo and Oxnard airports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't drag us through too much on the same thing. This is the third element of our budget. I sort of touched on it really when we were doing the budget slides. Happy to go into it again. Let's see, John, if you would roll the next slide. I'll be sort of quick here on this because it's the same story. And again, we sort of touched on it already a couple of times. But this is to approve the 5-year capital improvement plan for the Camarillo and Oxnard airports and authorize the Director of Airports as designated to apply for the grants and fund the projects. Next slide, John. We have a slide here showing the Camarillo Airport. Again, we talked about earlier that the Camarillo Airport is not really slated for any projects this year. Next slide. Oxnard Airport is slated for the runway project that we talked about a few moments ago. So we're illustrating that project here, and I don't know, John, do we have any other slides at all, or is this that was it, back up. And then also we have Erin Powers on our project manager LinkedIn, so she can help as well. And Erin, I apologize if you were meant to present this. I may have stole your thunder there, but again, we've touched on it a couple of times through the budget process and so forth. So let me pause here and ask Erin if she had some more conversation she wanted to provide to that.
No, I think you covered it. Our primary projects at both airports are focusing on our runway and taxiway infrastructure. And to that end, we have several no project years where we are saving up our entitlements, and we are working closely with the FAA to appropriately fund the projects and balance our needs with the funding that may be available. So we are aligning those projects up with the years that the FAA has indicated that there is a chance for those projects to move forward.
Thank you, Aaron. And we're open for any questions on capital projects specifically, but as stated a couple of times earlier, this is the third element of our budget.
Are there any questions of staff from authority members?
Mr. Chairman, is this the discussion on the 5-year capital improvement plan, or just the projects themselves?
Well, this is the discussion for the entire capital improvement plan, so that includes all the projects included therein.
That's right.
Okay, I have a question on the chart that's on page 6, Charlie 2. And the title of the financial grid is current fiscal year budget projection.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Chairman, if you're okay with it, I'd like to ask Jamal. I'd gotten a little insight on that, and asked Jamal to be ready to prepare to discuss on that. If I'm out of turn there, but if not, Jamal, if you're still on.
Yes. Can I hear the exact question, please?
Okay, Jamal. This is Bill Thomas. When I look at that adopted budget, adjusted budget, projected budget, and estimated savings or deficit, other than the adopted budget, I'm having a hard time understanding what that chart tells me. So is there a way to walk through? There's only 4 columns and 3 sets of numbers in each column. What are they going for?
Okay, the difference between the adopted and the adjusted is the adopted plus any changes to the budget. For example, if you look on the very top line for appropriations, well, first of all, the 3 lines, appropriations are the total expenditures, revenue, and then the net cost is revenue from appropriations less revenue equals net cost. Adjusted budget in the top column for appropriations is a big jump there, and that's the rollover of the Northeast Hangar project from last year's budget to this year's, because we didn't use those funds last year. They were rolled over. The auditor controller rolls those numbers over. Same thing with the revenue. If you see the big jump from $1,816,000 to $4,008,000, same thing. The Northeast Hangar revenue was also rolled over, so that's why there's a difference between the adjusted budget and the adopted budget. The projected budget is where the CEO's office asks departments 3 times a year to project what they feel is going to happen. So we did one back in March for the first quarter. We were basically budget back then because there was not enough information. And then we did one at the end of December, and then we did one more at the end of March. So the projected budget that you see listed in here is the projected budget with our most recent projections as of the end of March. And that's what is keyed into our budget management system. Do you have any other questions?
Well, the estimated savings, what my problem is that all of the others, you subtracted the revenue from the appropriations and got the net cost.
Correct.
If I subtract the minus $3 million from the $4 million, minus equals a plus, and in my view, it should be added, not subtracted. So what am I missing there?
So these weird. That's a good question. We use the formula that the CEO's office wants us to use for the board letters, for this graph, or here for the budget budget projection. So, for example, on the appropriations line for the adjusted budget, we have 11.9 million less the projected budget of 7, or we see we're going to end up at 7 million instead of 11 million. So you're seeing a savings there of $4 million. Same thing on the revenue side. So we thought that we were going to get 4.8 million, but Northeast Hanger is not. We're not going to be able to bill as much this fiscal year, so we project we're only going to bill 1.6 million. So that's actually a deficit. That's why you see the credit there. So the savings of 4.7 million less the deficit gives you a net savings of 1,538,000. I know the wording here is a little confusing, but we are asked to use this by the CEO's office.
No, the only confusing part is you got parents around the 3 million. If you didn't have the parents around it, it'd be 3 million. So you'd minus that from the 4.7, and you get the 1,500,000. I understand that. I don't understand the parents around it. That's all.
Me neither.
Okay, good enough. Enough of that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I will agree that it is confusing. I understand it now with the explanation, but I do agree that is the way it's displayed is can definitely be very confusing.
We'll bring it up with the auditors and the CEO and share their comment.
Do we have any additional questions from authority members? I will take the silence as no. Do we have any public comment?
No comments on this item.
No comments on this item. I'll turn it back to the Camarillo Airport Authority and entertain a motion.
Move the approval.
Second.
Was that Mr. Zaragoza seconding?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. Can we please have a roll call vote?
For Camarillo, Supervisor Long.
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Councilmember Molshay.
Yes.
Councilmember Craven.
Yes.
Bill Thomas.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
For the Oxnard Airport Authority, do we have a recommendation by a board member?
Yes, Oxnard.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. Roll call, please.
For Oxnard, Supervisor Long.
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Mayor Flynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Perrello. Walter Calhoun.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
The next item is exclusive to the Oxnard Airport Authority, so I'll turn it over to Bert.
The Oxnard Airport Authority, the subject, approval and authorization of Director of Airports or his designee to sign a design services contract with Mead & Hunt Incorporated in the amount of $1,507,310 for the final design of the Oxnard Airport 7-25 runway, taxiway connectors, and taxiway F reconstruction. Find the project categorically exempt from California Environmental Quality Act. Authorization for the Director of Airports or his designee to accept and sign Federal Aviation Administration grant number 3-06-0179-036-2020, if offered in an estimated amount of $450,000, which will provide partial funds for the final design contract Authorization for the Director of Airports or his designee to apply for, accept, and sign for a matching grant from the California Department of Transportation, if offered. Authorization for County Council to execute and certificate for sponsors' attorneys required by Federal Aviation Administration grant agreements, and authorization for the Auditor Controller to process necessary budgetary transactions. And I'm just adding this, I'm assuming Auditor Controller for Ventura County, but that's the subject matter. Do we have a presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to quickly hand it over to Aaron Powers, our project manager, here in a moment, and we also have some Mead and Hunt representatives that have tuned in with us tonight if there's any technical questions that you might want to get to. Before I hand it over to Aaron to take it further for discussion, this is a project we were talking, I was talking about a little bit earlier in our capital projects, really the main one that we're pursuing, or one of the main ones. The master plan would be the other. But this is the reconstruction of the runway at Oxnard, something that's been in the works for several years. Definitely something that we need to move forward on, and something we are excited to be in line for both entitlement funding and for discretionary funding. And Aaron can talk a little bit more about that, including the highlight that we were able to get a partial design grant this year that we didn't think we were going to be able to get. So I'll sort of stop there and hand it over to Aaron for any further discussion that you may want to have with it, Aaron.
Thank you, Pip, and thank you for reading all the recommendations, because it is a lengthy list. The two primary elements of these recommendations that I'll be focusing on include the final design services contract that we're seeking authorization for, and the authorization to accept a grant from a federal or state grant to help with the final design. As Kip said, we are, this is a very important, very large project for Oxnard Airport. Our pavements are due for some attention. Our infrastructure does need to be reconstructed. And so we are seeking authorization for the Director of Airports to be able to enter into a final design services contract with Mead and Hunt in the amount of $1,507,310. The contract will build off of some of the previous preliminary design and site investigation that has led up to identifying whether rehabilitation or reconstruction was necessary. The final design contract actually breaks out the design so that we may bid the project with a base bid of the runway, a bid alternate number 1 for the taxiway connectors, and a bid alternate number 2 for the parallel taxiway Foxtrot reconstruction. This will allow us the maximum adaptability to be able to move the project forward depending on the funding available in 2021. The contract, I want to make sure this is a reconstruction with one runway. Makes it very difficult to continue any sort of operations. And so this contract is structured to include extensive public outreach efforts. We'll be having informational meetings and updates at key milestones. We also plan to have a website presence and calendar updates. We'll be bringing some of those key milestone updates before our bodies as well, so the public has the opportunity to understand the direction that we are headed in our design. The other element of this item before you for consideration has to do with the seeking authorization to be able to accept a grant from the FAA Kip was right that we actually have been working closely with them and are fortunate that they are partnering with us to help us with our critical infrastructure projects by offering to fund this fiscal year, which was not originally planned, a partial to provide partial grant funds for the final design. The final design is significant in terms of cost, and so to be able to not have to carry that on the books and get some level of reimbursement as we move along is really ideal. Additionally, the FAA we are anticipating a minimum of $450,000 as the federal grant offer, but we are on the short list should end of year money become available. We may be able to get some additional dollars to increase that amount of the grant. Our final design grant is fully eligible for federal funding, so anything that we don't receive for full, to that at least 90% match, we will be able to include in our construction grant in 2021. And I think the last thing I wanted to, or a couple points I wanted to make, was that this final design grant is supporting an estimated construction cost of approximately $19 million if we're able to do all three elements. So this is a significant investment into the Oxnard Airport and into the local economy. The contract with Mead and Hunt, they are our engineer of record based on a 2016 5-year consultant selection process. That 5 years will be coming up during the term of this contract, but that doesn't impact their ability to finish out this project. The FAA, once the contract is let, we will be able to pursue this through with the same consultant. And then we did, as part of any contract of this size, and also it's an FAA requirement, we did conduct an independent fee estimate and analysis of the proposal, and the cost of the proposal came in 6.7% under the independent fee estimate. And while significant, it was found to be reasonable. And with that, I would ask Jeff Leonard, the engineer of record, is on standby and is available to answer questions, as well as myself.
Mr. Chair, Bill Thomas, can I ask a question?
Mr. Chair, this is Zaragoza.
Yes.
This is a long-term project that, if I'm mistaken, Aaron and Kip, we've been talking about this for quite a while. It's my understanding, if I'm correct, that we have to go down to the base of the runway as opposed to just going a slurry type approach. And I believe that's the route that we're going on this. And the other question that I have is 95.5, is that for what portion of the project?
Okay.
Yes. So the contract itself is eligible for 90% federal funding with a 5% of the federal dollar match from Caltrans. The grant at this point is a partial funding, but we ultimately expect to end up in the same funding level. If we just receive partial funds this grant cycle, next grant cycle at construction, we will be able to reach up to that 95%.
The 95%.
And then, if you, Jeff, are you online?
Hi, Aaron.
Yes. I can explain the question on the reconstruction if I'm able.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think last time we were talking about going all the way down to the base as opposed to just an inch or so. I can't recall exactly how deep we were going to go. Yes.
Yeah, so great question. And I think it was almost a year ago that I spoke with you about the project. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. And through our preliminary engineering analysis and looking at the longevity and keeping the runway in a safe operating condition, we will be doing a full reconstruction. The preliminary geotechnical investigation did show that the underlying subgrade materials under the existing pavement section were relatively weak, so we are going to go all the way down to the bottom of the pavement section to strengthen that and build it back up for a 20-plus year pavement design life cycle.
Okay, well, thank you. I kind of remember a little bit about that. Thank you so much. And the other question I have is, I'm glad that you're setting up the website and making sure that all the stakeholders and all the residents of Oxnard and the county, for that matter, that they're up to speed on the construction of this long-term project. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have two questions.
Go ahead.
The phase B and C, or alternate bid 1 and 2, if the FAA ran into financial issues because of what's going on, is there any chance that they might be able to fund the taxiway connectors and the taxiways before the main runway if they ran into a problem?
I'm trying to figure out who's the best one to answer that question. Is there any chance to fund the taxiway before the runway? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, we're assuming they're going to have their big pot of money, but I have strong feelings they might not. And so if there was a lesser amount of money they had available, does it make any sense to start chipping away at the taxiway or the connectors, or is it got to be done runway first and the rest?
Understand, I think, where the question's coming from, probably for the operational capability, if I'm guessing. Something we're going to definitely explore every avenue of during the design, the final design. The preliminary design's already been done, so I want to be clear on that. But during the final design, we're going to definitely explore every avenue of potential for keeping operational capabilities existent for as many operations as we can, or many types of operations as we can. So we'll be exploring all avenues. I can tell you, as a general standard or general rule of thumb, the FAA funds items from their priority standard is runway out. So knowing that we need all three of those avenues funded and taken care of, the runway would be number one in their eyes, connectors number 2, taxiway number 3. So if by some means they are going to be able to fund all three, which we're actually are pushing for in one sweeping motion, that's not something we're guaranteed by any means. It's something that we've pitched as an idea that we would like, that we're trying to get them to consider. One, it keeps our operation from being shut down and out of service. Instead of frequency, it just does it one time if we were to be able to do that. Even if they were to be able to do that, I'll be honest with you, Bill, it's probably still going to be a very tough road to try to figure out how to, because you have higher mobilization costs for different types of crews and that kind of thing. So I can tell you, though, in short and simple, we understand the complexity and the concerns of the operational aspect. There's a lot of effort and energy put into the scope of work for Mead and Hunt and to work with us. during the final design to try to make sure we come up with any avenue we can to keep operational abilities going during this project. At the same token, as Aaron pointed out, a one-runway airport can be very tough when it comes to having to reconstruct the runway to avoid having some interruptions. So, but that's part of the workshops we'll have and part of the efforts in the final design. We'll be able to better answer those questions, I think, as we get further in.
And I would just add on to, Kip is right. We, as part of this design process, will be having at a minimum monthly phone calls with the FAA as we work through this design with our engineering team. And so I imagine that as we are getting closer to finalization of the bid package, if there's opportunity or the FAA is providing updated feedback that they, we need to change our priority, then we have that opportunity, I believe.
Okay. Mr. Chair, do we have any speakers on this item?
Beg your pardon? Oh,
sorry.
A question before we do entertain if there's public comment. Are there any board members that have any clarification before we do entertain public comment? Okay, I have a question. With respect to Mr. Hagson's comment earlier in the meeting, and I appreciate him asking the comment with respect to the guarantee of the grant money. Again, I'm not an airplane person. Is there a possibility with the questions that Mr. Zaragoza has brought up and the consultant that this would be taken down to the base and started up, that if in the process of taking it down to the base and start up, the funds stop, this airport's out of action for an unknown period of time?
No, we'll either have a commitment to do the project or we won't.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, any public comment?
No public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, General Manager. Do we have a recommendation from the board or any further questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approved items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and to recommend to the Board of Supervisors this item.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Long?
Yes.
Supervisor Zaragoza?
Yes.
Mayor Flynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Perallo?
Yes.
Walter Calhoun? Mr. Calhoun, was that a yay or a nay?
Well,
It's a yes for Calhoun.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to get down to item number 7, which is the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairmans, I'll try to be brief. I had written about 4 pages here, but I'll try to spare you some of it and hit the highlights. The director's report this month, as you can probably imagine, as probably most of your other bodies that you all sit as board members or representatives of have spent most of their time talking to you about, is about what we've been going through for the last 2 or 3 months. So the director's report is more of a coronavirus, COVID-19 report, but I do want to share with this, with the authorities, some of the efforts that the Department of Airports has been actively underway with since the mid-March time period. We've talked about some of them already, so I'll try to be brief and skim through some of these, but the Department of Airports took immediate action to try and balance the impacts to the 2019 coronavirus. Some of the measures included considered essential, the airports are considered essential, so both airports remained open for business, we've not shut down for any time period at all during this pandemic. During this crisis. We did, however, close the admin offices to the public as per state and local orders. However, we were able to remain able to offer the same services while our offices were closed through either electronic or telephonic or appointment-based type scenarios. I got to really give it to our staff. I can tell you that we operate with a very limited staff. I've been at a number of airports through my career. Most airports I've had a staffing numbers of the same numbers that we have doing 2 airports. So I'm very proud of our staff, and I'm proud of the people that carry our flag for us. Some of them are in the room with you tonight. We began operating with essential personnel only, reassigned other personnel to the county as needed. We created social distancing measures and best practices for our essential employees. We authorized certain employees to telework from home, the ones that had positions and work that they could do so from. We canceled, of course, as you know, our April and May commission and authority meetings due to state and local orders. Authorized additional land for the Ventura County Emergency Medical Services Agency to use at the beginning of the crisis for some elements related to the county response. Authorized temporary storage for the storage space for the Ventura County Sheriff's Department to store some emergency supplies that are related to COVID-19. The Department of Airport transferred almost 1,500 N95 masks to county OES that we had in our stockpile. We requested commercial operators on both airports to report their essential operations. We initiated a hiring freeze on all of our open positions, started a baseline budgeting projection for next fiscal year with anticipation of impacts, started working on projections for revenue reductions as we've talked about, started reevaluating capital projects, initiated rent relief packages for our tenants, began daily tracking of operations and industry trends to try to determine what the impacts will be for us. A little bit more specifically on the rent relief package, the Department of Airport received authorization from the Board of Supervisors, Ventura County Board of Supervisors, to offer rent deferments for the months of April and May of 2020 for those suffering substantial financial hardship due to COVID-19. We got that. We presented that to the Ventura County Board of Supervisors on April 14th, and they unanimously approved of that. They approved the rent deferments, including being able to waive the late fees and zero interest for those 2 months of deferment, and we're allowing up to 12 months for our tenants to be able to, that qualified for that, to be able to repay those deferments back. Just to give you a little recap of how that looks, 20 of our 67 commercial tenants, 29.8% inquired about the potential temporary rent relief. However, I'm happy to say that only 9 of those requested either full or partial rent deferment for April and May, so only about 13.4%. Of those, 2 were major FBOs. We have altogether in our 2 airports 6 FBOs, so 2 of our major FBOs operating at Camarillo Airport, and each had multiple leases with Department of Airport. So when they request relief, it impacts across the board in a number of ways with other leases, if you will. The Department of Airport has received 3 requests from private hangar owners for rent deferment to date, and 40. We've got some that are currently late, but we're waiving their late fees, and out of the 503 private hangars, we've only got about 40 that we're working on that. So overall, our tenant base seems to be hanging in there, and of course, we're doing everything we can to help them do so. Total impact for April and May rent deferments is not expected to exceed $694,380, and our total request of rent deferment to date equals $168,278.50, about 24.2% of that anticipated impact. Our fuel flowage has definitely been off as well for the months of late March and April and May, although we feel like that's probably starting to generate back in a positive direction, as are our operations. Speaking specifically about our operations, the Federal Aviation Administration reduced tower hours at our Camarillo tower on a temporary basis. They initially reduced the tower closing time from 9 p.m. to 5 p.m., and then they later revised those hours. They're currently operating from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. right now. They typically go to 9 p.m. at that tower, and from 5 a.m. to, so we still got a few hours missing that they're not back in full swing yet. But now that our operations have resumed to more normal numbers, our tower staffing is working, trying to get those back up. While late March had fluctuating impacts on certain days, equaling up to approximately 50 to 75% reductions in operations in late March, we're very fortunate. Our airports are very blessed and fortunate. We started seeing operations start increasing again in April and May. Now, some of that is more local traffic than itinerant traffic, and that's important to note because itinerant traffic is what complements particularly our businesses and our communities. More so, our itinerant traffic is more of our business traffic. But our operations are starting to rebound and a lot faster than a lot of airports do. A lot of airports around the country are not seeing the positive signs that we've been able to see if you can put a positive spin on it. For example, our total April ops at Camarillo were down about 33%. Our total May ops at Camarillo were only down about 13%. So we had a nice comeback in May for Camarillo. Our total April ops at Oxnard were down 37% in April. Our total May ops at Oxnard were actually up 6% over last year. So we've seen some nice positive direction back. I got to stop and just say that, a lot of that I think is credit to be given to our county leadership and our state leadership. I believe, I'm not the expert on this, but I believe our county might be, or was one of the first, if not the first, to be aggressive in trying to get back into a positive opening status again, and that's been reflective in our numbers as well, so we're excited to be affiliated with that. Although our ops are appearing to be trending back in a more positive direction, it still is important to note, as I noted a minute ago, that business traffic is still off, although we're starting to see that rebound as well. Some related to COVID-19, our DOA limited staff continued to operate as essential as needed. We had some reassigned to other county duties for emergency services and so forth to help out in other emergency operations the county was involved in. We had some that were teleworking, 3 that were teleworking, and 2 that were considered non-essential for DOA operations. You got to remember we have a total staff of 34 with 4 open positions, so it doesn't take much math to start putting together that we've been doing a lot with a few people here for the last 2 or 3 months. The Department of Airport estimated employee hours right now attributed to COVID-19 task is 1,925.1 hours that we've put into just COVID-19 tasks. That's not counting all of the work that our team and our department has to do on a daily basis for all of the other routine and normal things that we already do. We've already talked about capital projects, so I won't go into that again, how we reevaluated all of that. Just to finish off on this portion of the COVID-19 update, just to touch on the overall industry. Our industry suffers very badly in any type of economic downturn. The aviation industry particularly suffers as other types of industries do too. Aviation is definitely one of the top industries that tends to suffer the worst. For example, the 4 legacy carriers that you are accustomed to getting on an airplane when you fly commercial, all of them are talking about massive layoffs. They've all work towards retiring planes and getting rid of aircraft and staff and pilots and management and cutting out routes and getting out of markets that they weren't profitable in. So you're going to see more of that to come before it gets better. It's going to probably get a little worse on the airline side. Luckily, on the business side, we think once on the business aviation side, we think once the things start getting more in a trend back to normal, business aviation is not as high risk because you're not on a commercial aircraft with large numbers of people. So business aircraft, we think, will continue to see a rise and trend back in that, which is positive for our businesses and so forth that rely on that. But right now, just to give you an idea on the airline side, they're processing on average about 15 to 17% the number of passengers nationwide domestically that that the airlines are accustomed to processing. So you're across the nation, the airlines are processing on average right now, which has just climbed up from 150-something thousand a day to about 300,000 or 350,000 a day. the same period last year, they would be processing 2.6, 2.7 million passengers a day. So our industry is really taking a huge impact. And that's on the coronavirus update, and just the tail end of the director's report. On a couple of other things. First, I want to pause and welcome our new deputy director, Dave Nafee. He's here. I don't know, Dave, if you have a camera that you can, there you go, so the world can see you. But we want to welcome Dave on board. Poor Dave has not had the proper introduction and welcome that we would have normally done for him. He started on March the 16th, and we got the governor's order the next day, I think it was. So Dave has missed out on the proper welcoming, and so I have some work to do to make it up to Dave and to make sure our cities and our county know who Dave is and part of our team. So I've got a little work ahead of me there, but welcome, Dave, and we're proud to have you here.
He didn't miss out on your hiring freeze.
I'm sorry?
I said he didn't miss out on your hiring freeze.
He just got in. He slid in under the radar right before the hiring freeze. That's exactly right. Thank goodness, because we immediately put him to work. He had no honeymoon. He was immediately thrown to the wolves' den, if you will. Just real quick, and I'll wrap up with the director's report. A couple of project updates that have nothing to do with the projects we've already discussed, but just some follow-up. The Camarillo Airport Northeast Hangar project. The vertical construction's now going up. I sort of touched on it a minute ago, so I won't talk too much on it. But the Camarillo Taxiway Hotel improvements were completed. We finished that. Talked about the Oxnard 139 discrepancies being completed, and we've talked about how we're expecting to move forward on the master plan. Also, the Silver Strand lease was approved by the Board of Supervisors on April 21st. You may remember it. It came before your bodies just before that. And I think some of this other stuff I can wait and and do another day, because that's a pretty lengthy report. So I'll stop, Chairman's. And
I think you told Mr. Sullivan you'd tell where the Amazon trucks would be parked.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. I was going to follow up on that. Do you want to answer that question from Mr. Sullivan?
I'm happy to. Yeah, it's I don't have the lease parcel exhibit to put up because we didn't expect that question, but there's a lease parcel that Madeline, our lease manager, can talk much better to. And Dave, I don't know, since you work closely with Madeline now, if you've got any further intel on that, but the parcel that we have is in the business park. It's the parcel that is what they needed for the operation that they wanted to do. They feel it's more than adequate for what they need to do. I don't know if all of those vehicles are supposed to be there at one time, or if that's what they anticipate processing through a year's time or something. And the money is just reflective of the lease.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't have the exact numbers at hand, but it's simply a function of the amount of land that they wanted times our rent and fee amount as negotiated. So it's just simply the math from that.
Is that where the cars from the port used to be?
No, ma'am. That was a nice ability that was able to be done then, but that we wouldn't be able to do that again. So no, this is just a lot in the business park.
Is it the dirt lot?
Is it in where we used to call a Harbor Freight lot?
I think so. I think it is. I apologize. I've been so busy on some of this other stuff, and that was such good news. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I think it is that dirt lot. I believe it is.
It's very close to the fuel farm.
It's the lot north of the Camarillo fuel farm.
Okay, John just verified it's the lot north of the Camarillo fuel farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Do authority members have any other comments and or questions of the director in regards to his report?
Yes.
Bert?
One of the public comments, Mr. Sullivan was talking about potentially large airliners coming in and then being able to take off and being lighter taking off. I should be more up to speed, but I thought the issue was the weight of an airplane coming to land and how much the runway would take. So if the plane is coming in, he's going to be taking off lighter. He's going to unload his packages here, and he's not leaving with packages, and I understand. So in the future, maybe we could address something like that. I think the question is a good question, right? And I don't have an answer, right? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I have one of my own. Earlier this year, Mr. Attorney had mentioned some issues, some operational issues with cameras and in terms of security and retention of some of that media. Do you have any updates relative to that?
We were just literally talking about it this morning, John's sort of spearheading that project now. I will tell you that we were making some progress, and then when the pandemic hit, we hit the brakes on everything, including that project. But this morning, I was talking to John about it, and we actually, I told him to go ahead and complete the effort of getting the quotes and the estimates. We're actually going to enhance a little bit more than what we were initially talking about. We won't even expand that even further now for more cameras for both airports and more viewing ports, different viewing stations. So we're going to find a way to go ahead and do that, we think, unless things get really, really bad. Financially, we think we can still absorb that project and move forward on that. So, yes. And short answer, yes. We have made progress. Hit the brakes a little bit because of what's been going on, but then now we picked it back up.
All right. Any additional questions? I will take the silence as a no. In that case, we will move on to reports. In our packets, we had our reports. Does anyone have any questions in regards to the reports in our packet? No. We'll go down to number 9, correspondence. Any questions in regards to correspondence? Nope. All right. Nothing under miscellaneous. We'll go down to authority comments. Do any authority members have any comments, parting comments before we adjourn?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Zaragoza.
Zaragoza, and I'm not sure I couldn't hear Kip that closely, but I know that starting Monday, all the government offices and buildings are going to be open, just for information, and I'm sure that most of the agencies that we report to are going to be able to probably go to the dais without having to go to Zoom. But my understanding also that some of the things that the county wants in the county buildings is to make sure that we follow the distancing guidelines and masks are optional and masks are optional and at the government center they'll still take your temperature. Supervisor Long, did I miss anything? If you're still on.
Yes, I'm still on. Basically, we're giving more flexibility on meetings. You could either be at the meeting itself or on Zoom. And then also the flexibility of being able to email or be on Zoom for comments along with being at the meeting to do comments. So providing comfort for each person as to their safety.
And one of the things to add, we want to thank all our residents and all our people that work with us for following the guidelines, So I think Ventura County has been the forerunner and the guidelines that the governor set up. And that was shared too by our chair and also the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, and if anyone wants to go online, we just announced more reopenings for businesses and such. So thank you very much, everyone. Well said, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and it's good to see things opening back up, and particularly the government. City of Camarillo set a target date of June 29th ourselves, and we hope to have City Hall open and available to everyone who wants to come. Social distancing procedures in place, of course. I do have two, if no one else has any other comments, I just have two quick comments myself. And that's, Mr. Thomas, I really appreciate your background. I like it. And two, I think this went rather smoothly for our first go-around. And so I appreciate everyone's cooperation. And it could have gone really, really bad, but I feel like it went pretty dang good.
Well, thanks to my team for that. They're the ones that made it happen, so thank you.
So I greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate the time and the effort put into.
Particularly John and Anna. They should be patted on the back.
Yeah, the only thing is that it would be nice to see the people on the dais, you and Bert, but then hiding.
Just hiding here on the dais. All right, with that, if there are any other comments, oh, by the way, Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the welcome.
All right, with that, we will bid adieu, and we will adjourn the meeting of the Camarillo and Oxnard Airport Authorities.